Welcome to USA Biz Party. I'm Anna Scheller,
And I'm Esther Ocampo.
and we're so glad that you chose to join us today. Today, we're going to be talking about a pretty hot topic in terms of business. And some of what we're going to be talking about is actually very relevant to people who have been working from home for a long time or are now having to work into a hybrid environment. So we're looking forward to discussing the good, the bad, and the reality of the
I thought you were going
hybrid
to say the
environment.
ugly there.
No, 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 that's a spaghetti western. And while I live in the West, not my thing right now. So, but before we get started, Esther, how has a lot of this has come as a result of COVID.
Yeah,
So prior to COVID, people were pretty much working at home. In the
in the
offices.
office. Yeah, yeah.
And COVID drove people out of the office and into their homes. And of course, now there's a huge push, especially here in the United States, to get back to the office. And so the hybrid model is still very much in play, but how is that working over in your area of the world?
Yeah, so I'm based in the UK, Ireland, and it's the same over here. It very much took off during COVID. Everybody was forced to work from home. Everybody was told, stay at home, work from home when you can. Employees had to provide proper seating and proper facilities for their employees. So it was almost like they got their office desk sent home to them so that they could work from home with the correct facilities because people were complaining about sore backs and not having the right mouse or wrist rest and things like that. So there was lots and lots of things that employers had to do to keep their employees happy while working at home. We're talking nearly 5 years ago now with COVID, but it's something that at the start people were very reluctant to do because everybody was so used to going into work and getting, their time away from the house and the family while they were commuting in, and the same on the way home. But I think now people much prefer to either work from home or have that hybrid working where they can go in when they choose to, stay at home when well, in inverted commas, choose to. But here in the UK, it seems to be they're trying to get just like you're saying there in the States, they're trying to get them back to work. There were brand new offices built here during and just after COVID that are lying empty because people are still working from home. But the government is making the push on employers to get people back into the offices so that there's, I don't know whether they want the cities and towns to seem busier or seem more full, or, because lots of things had a knock-on effect when people started working from home. But at the minute, I think most companies who did send them, all home to work from home are now doing a 3 and a 2 day. So they'll work from the office 3 days and from home 2 days, or vice versa, depending on the company. But yes, just like in the States, there is a huge push going on to get people back into the office. But we're going to discuss whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Or, well, I think there are challenges and there are benefits on both sides, and
Yeah.
it does require quite a bit of conversation between employees and companies. I've seen where there were companies that said if people aren't willing to go back to the office, they would be fired. I have a personal opinion about that. It's not the way I'm managing that situation because I do have employees. The interesting thing about our company when COVID hit was that we did not have the capability of letting people work from home. So we had separate offices in the building and we went to work, but we definitely kept our distances. When we
Mm.
were getting close to each other, we were wearing masks. And a lot of it was because I did not have everything had to be done at the office for a while.
Yeah.
When I started to get employees who were working remotely, we I was still having certain employees work, and we're going to get into some of that because you talked about a bit about the challenges and about the benefits. But
Yeah,
why don't we just start with some of the benefits of the hybrid model? And we're talking about the hybrid model where you're
yeah.
working part-time from home, part-time from the office, and how that works for you.
Well, obviously, in my case, like I've always worked from home. In the 10 years that we've been running IPA Group, we have always worked from home, and we have remote workers. So we have people working for us in other parts of the world. We maybe get together once every 2 years, and that's
Gotcha.
our working together time. But it has worked for us. So I think in terms of benefits, I only know what I've heard from other people. So you that has the hybrid model now working well in your company, maybe you know more about the benefits. Because I, for one, as an employer, would say that it's definitely going to save money because I wouldn't have to pay for an office building for everybody to be in and pay the electricity and pay the water bill and whatever else needs to be paid. All the extra electricity, sorry, the internet bill whenever I'm already paying an internet bill at home,
Right.
so whether there's, I would think of that as one of the pros of having hybrid workers where they're spending their own electricity and using a lot of their own internet that they're already paying for. So that to me would be a pro in terms of not just hybrid working, but also environmentally. I think it's better for the environment if people are just not moving around so much.
Yeah, well, there are some environmental concerns. Now, as the owner of our company, and I just want to mention we have Tom Reed waiting backstage. And Tom, if you can hear me, can you get your camera going? Because all I see is gray. We would love to have you join us. Let's see if we can't get your camera going first. Do comb your hair. You will be seen by people. We are, by the way, we're broadcasting to LinkedIn and to X and to YouTube. So we appreciate everybody who's coming and joining us. So
And watching.
and watching, yes. Thank you for that. So the hybrid, how we evolved into a hybrid model is that like I said, before COVID and during COVID, there were employees that, um, oh, Tom came for a chat, not a broadcast. Okay.
Oh,
So, Tom, feel free to share your questions in the comments and we'll share them with the audience. So let us know if you mind if we bring you up on stage with us with your grayed out screen. That's cool too. So uh, it getting back to the reason I didn't part of the reason was equipment wise. The other part was that the employees I had at the time, I was concerned about their productivity when they weren't being supervised.
it's a
And that's
trust
one of the
issue.
challenge. Well, they were a lower paid employee.
Yeah.
So I felt that they would need the supervision in order to stay on task. And I remember one employee asked if she could work from home. And we told the employee, who at the time was not being productive at the office, well, you need to demonstrate that you can work on your own here before we let you work from home. And so there was definitely a productivity issue that we were looking at. We went through some significant turnover in the company, and with that turnover, it was deemed best for us to all go remote. My employees had children that they had to take care of from home, and so they were looking at a cost savings. So they actually asked to be able to move to their houses, set up an office in their home, which of course they could not. I don't want to I don't want to get divergent here. They wanted to be able to set up a desk at their house and work from home. We did that for a couple of years, but now we're moving back to a hybrid model because we have found that there's better communication when
Hmm.
we're required to meet together periodically. So we work from the office 3 days a week, and all of our meetings are mandatory. So if I call a meeting, everybody has to go to the office. We don't do the meetings online anymore because there's something about walking over to somebody, looking at their screen, seeing what they're talking about, that there's greater clarification.
Yeah,
So in my business, because we're working with, you know, excuse me, so many clients, and we really need better, well, everybody needs better communication, but we particularly needed good communication. Um,
yeah.
that
No,
we decided that we need to go back to it part
yeah,
time.
yeah,
So
yeah. And because I've heard, like I said, with us having fully remote people, um, we do find sometimes communication is an issue, or if we're not all connected at the same time. But I've heard from other people who say that they are going into the office on alternate days to other people and still having their meetings on Zoom. And they find that so counterproductive when they should, like you say, be having their meetings in person and doing everything else, online and having their Zooms, because I don't know, Zoom fatigue became real
very
5 years
real.
ago when we all started doing it. And so nowadays it's still such, when someone says, "Oh, I'll see you on Zoom," it's like, "Oh, okay." Just, I think it's evolved. Some people have moved with it and have, embraced it. Other people have pushed back against it, and it's just not going to work for them. But when it comes to your employees, you have to find that happy medium that, what works for one won't work for another, but it's always been the way. We just have to adapt and adjust, and find that, like I say, happy medium that works best for the majority of people. But you were saying there, Anna, about when, the productivity, and productivity has always been something that people say when they talk about, not being in the office. But I found when I did work a corporate job, most, like, more than half of the time was spent chit chatting to the people beside
Mhm.
you, or making, we're British, making cups of tea, and then drinking those cups of tea. And the time, like, I maybe out of an 8-hour day, maybe worked 4 of those hours. So the other 4 were really wasted by sitting there but getting paid for it. Whereas when working from home and working for myself, I cram so much more into 4 hours and into 8 hours. And I find that I'm so much more productive. Yes, the washing machine calls to me. Yes, the dishwasher calls to me, and everything that needs to be done around the house is really, tempting to get done during working hours, especially in the summertime, if you know what British weather's like. But you
Yeah.
have to be flexible and do these things as well, because if you can still get the same amount or more done in the time period that you're designating to it, then I don't think productivity is really an issue, unless it was always an issue.
Well, now as an employer who's going to a hybrid model, one of communication to me is like the huge piece for the reason we went back to the hybrid model, because we use Slack as the
Chat.
channel that
Hmm.
the chat that we use. Some people use Teams, but Slack works really, really well for us. And the challenge we were running into was that there were certain team members who seemed to forget what was going on inside of Slack.
Hmm.
And when I
Convenient.
would ask, what's that?
That was convenient.
Very convenient. So somebody that I gave a task to would say, "Well, you said you were going to do that." So I'd have to scroll through the chat thinking, "I don't remember saying that. I don't remember putting that in. Don't remember discussing it that way." And I would say 2/3 of the time the person was incorrect. So what so the big push for us right now, there's a couple of things. One, we do need a place where we can work together. So things like we do treat bags for our guests pretty much quarterly. You pick a holiday and you make a treat bag associated with that holiday.
Mhm.
So then all hands on deck. Also having this central location, it enables us to consolidate a lot of the inventory that we have to work with. See, in your case, that wouldn't be appropriate, but in
No,
my case, it is. So I think each employer needs to look at the benefits because there are benefits from letting your team work from home. In your
yes,
case, you're talking about more productivity. In my case, I'm looking at members who their kids have soccer and baseball and basketball, and then they have doctor's appointments. And what they end up doing is working until 10, 11 o'clock at night, trying to get caught up on their work.
yeah,
And so the challenge then becomes, are you still productive at 10 o'clock at night? Is that a great time for you to be working? But if she's required to come, or she or he is required to come to work,
mhm,
come to a workplace, then the distractions of, well, my kids are asking for a snack. And that's a big challenge, I think, for anybody working at home, is that you have to set boundaries between what is work and
yes,
what is not work. And then you have to train your family to respect those boundaries. But if you don't respect those boundaries, your family's not going to
yes.
respect them.
Yeah, it's a knock-on effect. They're going to say, "Well, you're turning on the dishwasher, the washing machine, you're taking private phone calls when you're supposed to be working, so why do I need to knock before walking into your office?" It's the famous like videos that we saw during lockdown of you know, people just bursting into rooms and in the middle of very important interviews. Um,
Right.
but I think too, the world has moved on in that they're more understanding of people working from home and having those interruptions. We're now almost programmed to expect a cat to walk across the front of the Zoom screen or to
I remember
I'm saying
those.
that because there's one sat up there looking at me. Um, fully expect her to jump down at any moment. But it's there's not so much of the stigma attached to saying that you work from home or that you don't have an office building or that you're working out of even a co-working space or other somewhere else that's not
Mhm.
an officially titled office or somewhere that you maybe couldn't invite clients over to. But people are more, like we said earlier on, it could be a cost saving method, it could be a commuting saving method where you don't have to
Mhm.
commute. I mean, the nearest city to me is an hour away on a good day with no traffic. So if I were to commute into Belfast from, on a normal Monday to Friday, it could take up to 2 hours of my time. And during those
Mhm.
2 hours, you're not productive. Whereas you could be using those 2 hours to do pre things or, do everything else that you need to do, like getting the doctor's appointments before starting work. So
Mhm.
like you said, there has to be that balance between, your family knowing what and when you're doing things and having that. Some people like the security of knowing, okay, I walk into the office, my brain clicks in and I shut off
Mhm.
every other um, outside factor. And, because they know, there's other generations who, if you're in
Mhm.
the office, they're not going to bother you. My parents just think that I DOS. So they phone at all hours of the day and night because, Esther's not working. It's a generational thing. But I think working from home, you can have those blurred lines of,
Mhm.
and like you said, with your employees working till 9, 10 o'clock at night, is it productive? Are they just trying to tick a box and say, I completed the task? Did the task really need 6, 7 hours to be completed? There's so many things.
Right. Now, I want to address a comment to Tom, who's still backstage. Tom, if you'll let us know if you want us to bring, because now we do see something on your screen there. So let us know if you would like to join the conversation live with us. Oh, there he is. I'm
Maybe
going
Tom
to
could
go
bring
ahead
us
and.
the legal aspects of working remotely and working
How are you,
hybridly.
Tom? Oh, yes. How are you, Tom? Welcome to USA Biz Party.
So we're not doing a chat at all anymore. We're just doing the live stream.
We are. We're not going into the feed anymore. It hasn't been as productive, and trying to move to where all broadcasters are heading, which is the live stream.
No. Well, I probably can't offer much at all. One of the issues you have with the live streaming is that different countries actually have laws about what is allowed, what's not allowed, and what is work time and what is not work time. And it's so diverse around the world that, number one, I don't know all those laws, but number two, I wouldn't be qualified, from a licensing perspective to even give such advice. So I'm kind of
Well, how about from the American perspective? Because that's, it is USA Biz Party.
I'm old school. There are serious benefits that come with close personal interaction with people. There is great benefit to being able to stop down the hall and chat with somebody, even if it's not directly work related. And when all you're doing is interacting with an image on a screen, you can, and everybody's done it, you can put up an avatar, you can put up one of those filters so that you look like a bunny or a cat, or you do all this. And as I teach negotiations, I'm discovering this more and more to be a problem. You don't realize how much message you receive from body language, nor do you recognize how much you send through body language.
Mm.
And in negotiations, that's obviously a big thing, because whether you're looking up to the left or looking up to the right tells whether you're remembering something or making
Or
something.
lying.
Yeah. Just by watching,
I can never remember which way it is.
just
Do
by
tell.
watching people's eyes, you can tell things that don't come through on a screen. I mean, you're literally this big to me, and that's it. And if you open your eyes really wide, or you raise an eyebrow, or smirk, as you're doing right now, I won't pick that up necessarily. And so there's just this whole idea of I want to use the term presence, and whether it's screen presence or in office presence, they're different. They're very different.
Very.
And while we can acknowledge it, learning to adjust to that and understanding that the persona that we are on social media is more reflected by the persona we are on screen, less reflected by the persona we are in an office 9 to 5, 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say I'm old school, I get technology. I get that we need to use it. I get that it's more efficient. I get that it reduces travel. I mean, we do that whole list of things where we say
Right.
virtual is better. But as an instructor in classes, which is mostly the way I earn money these days, I don't get the opportunity. For example, I'm invited to a client's facility. I go into a classroom and I teach. And then at lunchtime, I hunt down the decision makers with budget. And I go have lunch with them, or I invite them to lunch, or I set up a meeting, this totally takes all that away. I can't do any of that now.
Right.
And so I find my marketing is inhibited. I find that my presentations are often inhibited. Class participation, I can't see. You could be sitting there on your computer playing solitaire. In a classroom, I can walk to the back of the room and see everybody's screen.
Yeah.
Here I can't do any of that. So that's why I say I am very much old school. I think there's a much greater benefit to the in-person interaction for all these reasons that I've said. Yet, here we are. We have the technology. We use the technology. So I don't have good solutions. And as I said, then there are laws about when you're on the clock or not on the clock. Nowadays in a lot of states in America, you've got, if you are on call, you're on the clock. And a lot of employers are like, no, I can't afford that. And you say, yeah, but the employees can't totally disrupt their life and sit by the telephone waiting for you to call to see if you need to come in. That impacts their life. And so different states have done different things with how do you do that on-call process. And so you put all that into this big pot and you stir it all up. And candidly, I don't know where we are in a lot of respects. And given that all of this crosses state borders and for American purposes, the federal government is responsible for the commerce among the states. And so it seems to be something that has been properly delegated to our federal government, not just the states. And the federal government, being the supreme law of the land, says if they come up with something, then we'll all have the same standard and it'll all work better and we'll all have some consistency. And business loves consistency. I tell people that in contract management all the time. Your job, your only job, is to bring certainty to the business transaction. And if you fail in that, you failed in your job. You failed in your primary purpose. So that's why I say all these different laws, all these different standards, it's tough for employers these days to comply with everything. And we, of course, have a Congress that can't even figure out how to pass a budget every year, which is the primary purpose. And it fails every year in doing it. So anyway, I'll get on a soapbox if I go any further. But I don't know if that helps any or contributes to the conversation. But you wanted me here. I combed my hair. I put a shirt on.
Thank you. Well,
and all this. But like I said, when I signed on, I didn't come for this. I came. Let's just type a bunch of words and put them up in the chat.
Well, I think you bring up I think you bring up a huge point, and it's presence. So if I'm on a Zoom call, it's not unlikely, because we have some interesting internet issues out here in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes my team can't even put their image; they can't even put a face. So I really don't know what's going on when we're having a conversation. I personally I like giving them the freedom to work from home on things that they don't necessarily need to communicate with somebody on the team with. I mean, all of my team members have that, but like my operations manager, that gal, she has to coordinate with a lot of people. It's much easier for her to have people meeting her at the office so she can tell them, look in their face, say, okay, do you understand? Because sometimes people say, yeah, I get it. They're like, no, I don't think you got anything. Personally, I don't know where your head went. Well, you don't say that, obviously. That's not appropriate. But the whole idea is that if she's meeting in person, she can look at the people and she can say, okay, do you understand what I'm asking you to do? And then they kind of, they're not hidden behind a camera or an avatar or anything else. And she can read them better so that she knows if the message has been clearly communicated. And then my thing is I have, like I was saying earlier, it's we have employees who are home and they have children. I'm not talking one child, although one child can be just as many as four when it comes to interruptions to family work or to work. But here's another challenge. Right now I'm talking to you on a MacBook Pro. So I can pick up my MacBook Pro at 8 o'clock tonight and go, shoot, I really don't want to sit in the office. I really want to be with my family. So I'm just going to take my computer with me and go into the living room. Now, I will tell you, there's a feeling of being torn when I'm doing that, because yes, I want to be with my family, but now I need to get work and they're expecting me to interact with them. So then there's this difficulty of trying to stay focused on work with not, ignoring my family. And I am not unique. I am not unique. A lot of people, not just in my company, but a lot of people have that kind of dynamic that they're running. And so we were earlier talking about blurred work-life boundaries. And it's very easy to do when you're working from home because, as a mother, what's important? My family. And sometimes I have difficulty saying, you know what, that can wait 20 minutes while I finish this task. Because, well, right now I have a granddaughter who is living with us. And I'll tell you, my family has given me all kinds of grief because they're like, well, you hear her and you get up from wherever you are and you take care of her. And they're mostly, not 100%, but mostly right. And so it can be, and then what ends up happening is people work late, and then they're not as sharp, and they're not as their acuity is down because they're just tired. They've been dealing with family all day long, and the problem is they're dealing with family. They're trying to deal with work, and that's even more stressful and more draining of the energy. Now, that being said, if people can manage their time well at home, then I think the hybrid model works extremely well. But I'm not going to walk into an employee's house and say, well, I'm going to keep an eye on you today to see how you're spending your time. Number one,
There
that's
were
intrusive. Huh?
no, I was just going. There were times during COVID that when people first started working from home, they were here. I mean, I'm talking here in the UK. They were told to turn on their webcams, and they were being monitored that way by, what do you mean you got up? Why did you leave your desk? And they were only going to the bathroom next door, but it was almost like they had to type, can I go to the toilet? Like being back in school, asking permission to go, because they didn't trust them enough, because it was so new, because they didn't know what was happening and what they were doing. And other companies that I heard of, now I'm not going to name names, they were even tracking the key motions,
Keystrokes.
the
Keystrokes.
keystrokes, to see what was being typed, and if they were typing anything personal, or if they were using, different software that wasn't allowed by the company. Then, it was this whole thing. They probably already did it when they were in the office working, under supervision. But
Right.
the minute they were released into the wild of their houses, it became a whole, separate issue of, oh, you're not being productive enough. But I think Tom brought up an interesting point there that I wanted to ask you, Anna, because you've got a team on the hybrid model, and he mentioned contracts. So how do you work that with your team? Do you hire them on a hybrid model, or do you hire them as working in the office and giving them the flexibility? Because there are people who have been hired on a hybrid model who've since been told, no, we're scrapping hybrid. And so therefore their contract is null and void, or it's in a breach of contract when the company does that. What way have you worked that?
Well, since we've gone back to the hybrid model, I I mean, I never put it in the contract that we were going to have a hybrid model or they were going to get to work from home. Now, if I was telling them they were going to get to work from home, and then I'm requiring them to come into work, and that was part of the terms of their employment, I think that's where negotiation has to enter in. And I'm making a big assumption here, but I'm assuming that Tom would lean that way because if somebody's expecting to work from home, it's important to them to work from home, and then you're suddenly changing the terms of their employment, then that has to be a discussion to see if they're going to continue to be a good fit for the company, because any employee that you have has to be a good fit for your company. And if your company is changing, then sometimes the people you hired a year or two ago, they don't always they can't always swing with the changes, and that's okay. They need to go where they're going to be productive. You have to be willing to, I think, anticipate that. Yes, sir.
We treat a lot of these things as though this is a brand new issue. And companies have shut down operations and moved to other states or moved across town that has inconvenienced people. And we've always used the employment at will doctrines, which are applicable in most states. You would say, look, here's the job, and you hold it right now, but we're moving this job here. Two choices. get your butt there instead of here, or find another job. And I remember in just the recent years, so many companies have moved out of California. A lot of them are here to Texas, Anna, as you well know. And I thought, well, gee, how many of these people could use a good contracts attorney, government contracts attorney?
All of them.
Musk in his SpaceX operation, that is, as I've said about aerospace. If you're in aerospace, you're a government contractor. Who else buys rockets? But nonetheless, this is not a new issue, is the point I'm trying to make. And these people that think they have some right, well, that's my job. You can't take my job someplace else. It's like, it's not your job. The company, and I can't tell you how many eons I've said this. The company does not exist to provide you employment. The company exists because it needs to return value to the shareholders, the owners. You are just a cog in the wheel. And your rights that you claim, and now we could get into a wonderful discussion about public service unions, different issue, different topic, strong opinions, but you don't have a right. There is no entitlement to that. There's no entitlement to a lot of things people claim these days. And so I want to highlight that, don't be treating this like a brand new issue. It's as old as the hills.
That is a good point. That is a good point. And, again, what you said, you give the people options. If they want to keep their job, then they have to change their willingness, the conditions. But I don't hire people based on whether or not they're willing to do a hybrid model. Now, the job description may say that you have to be able to work from home and come to the office. And if that's in the job description and they say, well, I have to be able to solely work from home, then that tells me we have no deal. We have no deal, because my employees need to be flexible. Now, my VA that works in the Philippines, I understand she's not going to be coming to my office. It's not feasible, but I hired her under that pretension. And when she's online with us during a team meeting, she has her camera on. She has to have her camera on. And so, but if I've hired people locally, they have to be willing to do the hybrid model, because there are times we need to come together as a team, and we do that 3 times a week, and you have to be there on time, every time. And so I appreciate your sharing that, Tom. We have about 5 minutes left. I have, speaking of negotiations, I'm heading out to do a few negotiations here locally. So that negotiation class is so good. And I need to get into the one that you offered me, because, which, by the way, I always speak about Tom's leadership classes in negotiation, but I think now more than ever, government contracts are real important, and it's in your best interest to understand how to be able to, number one, qualify for them, and number two, how to manage them correctly. So if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're one that can qualify for government contracting, like being veteran owned, woman owned, minority owned, or whatever I don't even know if I'm saying the right terms anymore, because terms have changed over the last few years, but that you definitely want to get in touch with Tom about that.
And we will have Tom on. We will have Tom on exclusively talking about his area of knowledge. So we've brought Tom on today. Areas. But we've brought him on today for a chat, and he's bringing up great points on something that he says he knows nothing about. So,
yes. Well,
imagine what he's going to be when he does come on, talking about all the things that he does
know. So, Tom, because of your work, just before we close out, because of the work that you do in negotiation, which really negotiation is nothing more than how to communicate, really, and get to a hopefully mutually beneficial result at the end of it. What kind of communication barriers? Well, that could be a longer discussion than we have time for, but you've mentioned this about the presence that people can have, and the importance of that in-person presence. And so when we're communicating and we're not able to be together, what are a couple of things that supervisors can be conscious of as they're communicating with their employees, specifically over the internet versus in person?
It's really an excellent question, Anna, and I'm glad you asked it. We for years offered a class on negotiating via email, and
Mm.
before that, decades ago, I offered a class negotiating by telephone. And if I'd been around in Dale Carnegie's day, I would have probably taught a class on negotiating by telegram. The point being that we
And smoke signals before that.
carrier pigeons, who knows? But the point is that we've got to evolve with all of that. And so I think it was last year, we just changed the title to negotiating virtually, so that we brought in the telephone or telegram or whatever message facsimile. We have so many agreements that we're locked down through trading faxes. That was the offer and acceptance just on a fax machine. So what I'm offering here is that yes, things are changing, and yet they're not changing as dramatically as you might think, because some of the same issues still arise. When I do the virtual negotiation class, I emphasize the clarity of communication. I emphasize developing your persuasive abilities, and that is a skill, and you can learn it. There's a lot to be learned with that. And then learning some of the other techniques, such as learning to ask excellent questions, to elicit good responses, to make people think about things, to consider the options. We talk about a contract having its terms and conditions, but we don't really think about, well, what are the conditions of the employment or the contract or performance or whatever it might be. And so when you begin to use persuasion and good questions and storytelling and the techniques of communication, they become much more important because, as we said earlier, you've lost the presence, you've lost the body language, you've lost so much else that went with that. And so you compensate. It's like, they say the blind person develops better sense of smell or whatever. I don't know how that works, but people say that kind of thing. That's the kind of metaphor that I would use here, and say that you've got to develop your communication skills across a range of them. And in the Sustained Leader book, there are actually 40 elements of leadership under the communication heading. So there's a lot to learn if you're willing to put the time and effort into it.
Exactly. Thank you for that. So as leaders, as supervisors, as people managing hybrid workforces, it's really important to be studying and learning more about communication. Again, reach out to Tom and find out more about how you can engage in his classes concerning communication, because as he said before, as he was saying earlier, the hybrid model isn't new. This is something that's been honestly, we've had people work at home and come into work. This has been going on for years. The thing is it's probably it's probably bigger in our eyes because there are more people involved now, and because of the aftermath of COVID. And so as leaders, and I'm not talking about just managers, I'm talking, if you're in a position where somebody listens to you about something, you are a leader. And you need to learn how to communicate effectively. And you also need to learn, I love that what you said, ask excellent questions. And if I might also add, you also need to learn when to zip it. That's actually probably one of the best negotiating tools in the arsenal, is to learn when to speak and when not to. And actually when not to is probably the harder skill, because we all want to speak.
Wasn't it Mark Twain who said, better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt?
Exactly. Oh, well, this has been, Tom, thank you for joining us. Really, always appreciate your perspective. When you come on and you say, oh, I really don't know much about that, actually, you always bring such value to the conversation. So you are welcome anytime. Thank you for joining us today.
I have a high personal standard.
Well, you meet it every time.
You do. You do. And hopefully joining us meets that high personal standard as well.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you,
Esther,
everyone, for
any
joining with
closing
us
words?
today. No, just thanking everyone for joining us, whether you're watching live on the repeat, whichever channel you're watching us on. Thank you very much, and we're back next week with another chat like this, maybe with Tom, maybe with somebody else. We will get his dates in the diary and let you know through Twitter, X, and LinkedIn what is coming up in the coming weeks.
And if you are watching and you find this content valuable, please click the button, subscribe to USA Biz Party, and then also click that little bell so that you're notified every time we go live. Thank you so much for joining us and make it a wonderful week.